So this is my final project. I'm going to focus on sociology and sports recruiting. It is one of my big focuses and something that I feel is very important to universities, to coaches, and to athletic directors. Um, as the market grows, internationals are coming over, even Americans and from different states. I think it's a big developing point that needs to be, I think, a main focus, and it's something that I personally find very interesting and have taken a great deal of research and thought into it, and something that I've talked about to other people and other coaches who've also said taken quite an interesting look into it. So, what is sociology? Sociology is the systematic study of the development, structure, interaction, and collective behavior of organized groups of human beings. So basically, what makes a group of people tick? What makes them work? What makes them think how they think, act how they act? A big one for me is, like what makes an Australian act how they do compared to the Americans, or how does an English person act compared to America, and why do they act like that? Why do they think like that? And that's kind of the cultural values and cultural norms that they've been grown up and brought up around from the wider community and their family as a whole. Why is that important? Well, for me, I think as a coach, it's important because when you're recruiting players, you're basically shopping. And when you're shopping, you want to make sure that you get something that works for your program, works for your team, and someone that the values that interlock, basically. So I think when you're looking as a recruit, as a coach, okay, if I'm going to get a player from here, this is probably what I'm going to get, 90% of it. Of course, all of this is skeptic and basically is down to characterization of a group of people and isn't always accurate. Like I could say that when I get someone from Italy, they're going to be passionate, and they can be the most unpassionate person that you've ever met. It just comes down to the statistical anomalies of a group of people. So why is man management important is probably one of the big questions as well. As a coach, an athletic director, you're both dealing with people. All right, it's how well you can interact with these people and how well you can get them to work together and how well can you get the best out of them. As a coach, how can you get the best out of all your players? You need to know your players. You need to know what makes them think, what makes them work, what makes them tick, and how do you make them feel the desire that you want? How do you make them want to get the best out of what they need? Some of the best coaches for this are Sir Alex Ferguson, who's one of the best Man United and the world's coaches, was phenomenal with man management and knowing how to deal with certain people in a certain way compared to other people. One of the other ones is like Pep Guardiola, who's one of the best as well. He's the new upcoming one that is just amazing. Knows his players, knows how they act, knows how they think, knows how they work, and can get the best out of them consistently. Some of the other ones, like in America, is like Penny Hardaway and AJ Hinch, which are two of the other big man managers in America that are just from different sports that I thought would be helpful in relating this so that people can kind of correlate it. The big part is just knowing before you buy. As a coach, you want to man manage and be able to man manage, well, you need to know what you're buying, and that takes a lot of research into the type of person, references from other people, but knowing the culture and the sort of people you're getting. Some of these, the main factors is familiarity with the area, knowing the standard of the player, knowing the standard of the living, and the correlations and understanding of the culture and its inhabitants. And these kind of all very correlate to like me as a New Zealander. I like to look for New Zealanders. I know what they're going to be like. I know the standard. I know what I'm getting out of them. And that's the same thing for anywhere. If you're from St. Louis, you know that the St. Louis kids, you know what you're going to get. You know where the good areas are. You know everything about it because you're familiar with the area, you're familiar with the culture, and you're familiar with the standard of living and the type of player that you're going to most likely get. And those are like key parts. And so that's why you'll notice a lot of coaches, like international or from a certain area, will try to recruit from a certain area, or until they have a connection to a certain place. Like some coaches will have certain countries that they prefer to recruit from, and they'll do that because they know the type of player, they know the culture that they're going to get, they know that the type of living and standard meets with their requirements of the school. One of the best examples is one of the head coaches for Wisconsin. When he was at UIC, he used to recruit a ton of Serbians and Croatians because his school could afford them and the culture that they wanted, and they did really well on that. And then when he moved to Wisconsin, the academic level was too high, and he knew that he couldn't bring them in, and so it was just a struggle, and then he no longer recruits them, and he goes for now a different country. So it's interesting to see how that also relates to program to program. Some of the factors of sociology when recruiting are very key, in my opinion, to knowing what you're getting, knowing the people. Some of these are the history of the country. You know, you need to know, in my opinion, the country's origins and history, and that shapes the way that people think and the way they are. A country such as Finland, Israel, Greece got rid of theirs, Tunisia and Libya, and South Korea all have mandatory military service for their youth. So any player coming out of there that's 18 will usually have to spend 2 years in the military, so you're going to look at getting them around 20, 21. So it's interesting that you need to know these things, because those are key factors that when you're going to recruit these kids, you're going to get a different type of kid, one that's known discipline, no structure, and going to be quite easily manageable in a way of coaching he knows to respectfully, compared to someone from like the South Americas or Africa, where they don't really have the discipline and ability, because the social structures are different there. So they're going to struggle in terms of when they come over here to be structured in all their life, and day to day they're going to be like, okay, and it doesn't work quite well. Knowing the cultures, so cultural beliefs, norms, you know, certain countries in Asia don't like you touching their heads. That's something that's important. Where in like the Middle East, you know, one hand is used for wiping your butt, and the other one is used for everything else. You need to know certain things like this. Certain religious practices don't allow you to eat certain types of meat, or that they fast during certain times like Ramadan, and the Jews have one as well. And so those are kind of important aspects that you need to know, because when you recruit them, that they're going to have their special benefits and needs that they're going to have to relate with. The same thing goes for the structure of the economy and the country itself. A country that's very first world, very developed, is going to have a little bit more discipline, a little bit more structure than a third world country such as Africa or South America or Mexico, where the structure might not be complete. So you can have guys that might be showing up late. They will be going to classes. They will be, you know, maybe they've not had their education formally or properly, or their education's been minor. So they're going to struggle in classes. They're going to struggle in all sorts, not including the English, which might be for a lot of first world countries. They pick up English as a second language, whereas in some of these other countries they don't have that. Social norms is another one. You know, what's expected. In England and Eastern Europe, drinking is a heavy culture. It's expected, it's normal. In the Middle East, smoking is huge, and it's just part of the living, just part of day-to-day life. In some of these, like Morocco, when we play with Moroccan players, they don't view women with the same respect and dignity that we do. And so when they came over here and women speak to them in a very outspoken way, they take offense to that, since they're not used to it. So it's just one of those cultural norms. Some of that is like in Bulgaria, where bribing cops is a big thing. They come over here and it's something that they're used to, and it's something that's not accepted here at all. So that's some of the big things that, you know, you don't quite know until you kind of get them, or unless you know previously from playing or being around. That is an aspect that kind of changes it up. So some of these things that you can see, and these again, this is my opinion, and people might have different opinions because you might have had a different player or whatnot, but some of these attributes of a recruit that you look for can be anything from creativity, organization, discipline, passion, work rate, aggression, knowledge of the game, respect, and technical ability. So I've kind of highlighted a few of these into like little subcategories because they kind of correlate to each other in my opinion. So some of these is like creativity, organization and discipline, passion and work rate, and it can be related to a couple of things. And phenomenon that you'll notice a lot of is in poorer countries, poor areas. It doesn't have to be like in America. There's certain areas that are less privileged. You'll notice, and when talking with academy coaches nowadays, the phenomenon back in the day was that, you know, best players were produced, especially in college sports, for sports. In soccer, compared to the rest of the world, soccer in America is the rich man's sport, wherever else in the world it's the poor man's sport. So in America, the white privileged kid that has the most money goes higher up. But what you'll notice nowadays, and when talking with the Fire Academy coach in Chicago, he mentioned that all they get now is Hispanic kids, because all the white kids are inside playing on Xbox, PlayStation, where the Hispanic kids outside playing all day. So they're the kids that want it, and they're the kids that are going to go higher up in the academies. A lot of creativity in players comes from playing on the streets, playing with the ball. Some of the best basketball players that are ever produced in the world are produced in these low-income areas where creativity is playing every day on the street, playing on these ball courts where that's all you learn. And you develop a bit of a swagger, a bit of a street ball style. In soccer, the street ball was kind of dying. Everything is organized from such a young age. At the age of 6, 7, kids are picked up and placed in academies from all over. And so it's structured, everything's structured. One of the famous coaches, Jurgen Cruyff, quoted that I, for 4 hours a day, would train with Ajax, which is one of the best youth academies in the world, for 4 hours. And then he said, after that, I would go play on the street for 3 hours. Where do you think I learned to play? And what he's saying is that, yes, he learns the game, he learns how to structure and everything like that, but where did he learn to play was on the street, where he would just be trying new things, creating, being, and learning and developing. And so what you'll see is a lot of these poorer kids that live for it will be less time inside, less time focused on maybe schoolwork or stuff, or maybe they don't get to go to school, and so their way out of the poverty is through playing. And so what they do is they play and they play and they play until they develop these unique, creative ways of overcoming situations in sport, which is a big part. So they're usually creative on the field, very, very unique in how they do it. Another one that you'll see is organization and discipline, and that kind of goes hand in hand, because a lot of these places that have third world issues aren't usually organized in terms of a lot of things. Structure, social, economical, it's all kind of hectic and all over the place. It's forever changing. So with that, discipline is a huge issue. So when you bring some of these kids in from like South America that, you talk to them in traffic, buses, public transport's never on time. When you tell people that you're going to be here at this time, they usually show up 10 minutes late. So you need to know that when you get these kids that you are going to deal with this kind of issue in terms of organization and discipline, where you get from these first world countries a lot more discipline, a lot more kids that come through and have been in a very structured educational, sporting, so that everything is, they know discipline, they know organization, they know how to be on time and everything. Passion is another weird one, because passion can be found kind of anywhere, but that kind of goes in hand with creativity. Usually the guys that live in it are more passionate about the game because for them it's their way out. And when you come over here and you talk with head coaches and stuff that have internationals and Americans, the American, when they come to college, is kind of expected, where an international, it's kind of do or die for them. Like if they don't graduate here and they get kicked out, they have nothing. For me, if I didn't come over here and I didn't graduate, I was going to be laying brick. So for me, it was like, this is it. I have one shot and only one shot only. If I mess this up, I'm done. So for me, everything was very strict and very structured. And when I talk to other guys, it's the same way. They live for it. They live for the game because the game gave them everything. Where the Americans, it's kind of more of a hobby at times for at least college soccer. Work rate. So we would have a little bit of philosophy on our soccer team is that we're a blue-collar team. Blue collars are hard-working factory, manual labor jobs. We're not a technical team where we can afford the guys that are, the white collar, great athletes, perfectly. We're hardworking. If we don't work hard, we get beat. And so when we work hard, we outclass every other team. And that's a work rate thing, as a blue collar. That's a different kind of person. That's again, it's the lower middle class that has the manual jobs. The lower classes that their parents were hardworking. They instilled the same values of hardworking beliefs onto their sons and children, and so those kids coming through now have known work rate. And you see them, they're a dying breed now of like a work rate, a kid that just works hard non-stop. You just see them, wow, like he just works. Might not be the best technically, but he just works. And again, that's something that you see more in the lower end areas because of the type of area that they live in, the type of work that their parents might do. And so that's a big part of when you're recruiting, like what are you looking for? You're looking for kids or for coming from backgrounds like a mining town in Australia, produce hard people because they've had to do hard work. Right? Russia, a communist country where everyone makes the same, produces hard people because the lifestyle and the situations that they live in are hard. And since it's everyone works and makes the same amount of money and no one gets anything, life is pretty brutal. And so the kids growing up live in this set standard where it's just, all right, you got to be tough, you got to work hard to get anywhere. Aggression also coincides with that because, like an example for me would be when I'm looking at the history of a country, countries that have had a lot of turnover with ownership, such as the Balkans, which is Yugoslavia, which is no longer a country, but Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, Czechoslovakia, all of those had at some point been in the hands of multiple different countries. Russia's the same thing, and so is Poland and Serbia and Ukraine. So these people coming out of there, and then you also incorporate the USSR that then for a very long time put them under a very strict rule. When you live in poverty, you either develop two ways, because if in a place where you got to be tough, you got to be strong to survive, the stronger you are, usually you're more aggressive because you take a more dominating stance on stuff. Again, this is all just correlation to what you see. So the people that usually come out of these areas are usually, on more times or not, they're very aggressive people. We had a Dutch Bosnian. I've also had played with Bulgarians, but we had a Dutch Bosnian that showed a lot of traits of Bosnian. And so that would have come from his growing up with his dad being straight out of Bosnia, and him having a second hand, and he grew up with Bosnians. So their mindset, since they only just got out of a huge civil war, is a very hard man. They're quick to anger, quick to aggression, because aggression's the first thing they go for. Bulgarians are the same way. Very nice people, but they're very, very quick to just get very aggressive with things. And that's just their surviving mechanism that they've had to produce because of a hard living style. Soft people don't survive in hard situations, so they find a way, and they're hard about it, and they take it. And that also then correlates with them being kind of suspicious of outsiders that aren't their own. Because, the USSR had a lot of secret police going on, a lot of persecution of people that were against the views and imprisoned. And that's why alcohol also plays into a big social norm in Russia, because to know someone, they would get really drunk with that person, and then that's when you're really drunk, you sometimes start opening up about stuff, and that's when you know who you're around. So these are some of the social norms that are developed through social and cultural norms that have developed over time. Knowledge of the game, respect, and technical ability all kind of correlate with more upper kind of class in certain areas. Technical ability in America for soccer can kind of go back and forth since it's the rich man's sport. A lot of the richer kids are more technically, and they have more ability to play. In the lower ends of the world, in the third world countries, it's usually the more poverty kids are the ones that are more technical. And saying that though, nowadays with the academies all being developed, more kids are being technical as they get picked up earlier on. Knowledge of the game just comes from the background understanding. Again, that's kind of more of a rich area. Or people that have the passion and watch and learn. Like, they understand, and knowledge of the game is massive. But coming from areas that are more developed with structure, usually they have a better learning and a better environment to pick up on the knowledges of the game and how it works, and the echelons and just everything like that. In terms of respect, that can go either way. Usually it comes from a very old school approach, I guess, where respect is still valued. A lot of days now the kids coming through don't have a lot of respect, in my opinion. That's because they've been given too much, where the kids growing up that were told, to be behaved and everything like this. And that fluctuates between countries and stuff. Some of the issues that you might face is, in terms of discipline, is like Saudi Arabia. I've talked this about before, with them being an Islamic country. There's no alcohol in that country, but they go over to different countries, Bhutan, and they'll drink and party. So when you get them over to America, and they're now able in a country that they can drink in, they go wild. They drink, party like crazy, they have no discipline because they've never had to, and they just let loose, and that's their way of just enjoying themselves. And so that's some of the stuff that you'll notice. And so with that, my biggest thing is knowing where a country comes from, like a people come from. And these are just some of the traits that, knowing your country, knowing the country you're recruiting, knowing the belief, knowing the structure. When I look at players in terms of recruiting for soccer, I'm looking at what am I wanting. I like physical, hard, passionate players. So my preferred kind of go-to is I like Eastern European. They're very hard, nitty-gritty. They'll get in there, they mess it up. Accompanied by, English is also kind of that way. Their players are viewed as warriors, and so they're expected to be battles. When I look at technical players that I like Spanish, Italians. They're very passionate, very dedicated to the game since a young age. They're very professional in their mannerism, and that's something that you want. Germans, for soccer, I like machines, mechanical. Everything is fine-tuned, but very robotic. It's just no creativity. The Spanish and Italians are the opposite of Germans. And then you look at the Nordics, so up north in the Northern Europeans. They are intelligent people, very robust, big, physical, but they're very kind of snobby, if you'd put it that way. So it just kind of depends on certain attributes that you like. Japan, super technical, one of the most technical countries, and that goes dating back to when they were in when they had the Japanese and the samurai, and the traditional sense from there that everything was perfected. If you did something, you did it to the best of your ability. And so when you take that to sport, they take everything to the best. So they are technically proficient, some of the most proficient players. But physicality-wise, they have small demeanors. They aren't the most physical players. But they are the artist with the stroke of the paintbrush. They paint on the field. And then from there, you go and you look at South Americans, very creative, Africans, very creative players, but lack a lot of discipline and structure. Very physical, athletic players, but they lack discipline and very hard. And on the field, they're kind of hard to control, and it's hard to change that when they're their whole life growing up. America, again, fluctuates just depending on the regions. If you go West Coast, it's very Hispanically influenced, so they're more technical players. When you go to the Midwest, they're big farming boys, so everything in their style of football within the Midwest is very kick and chase, physical. And then you go down south to Texas and Florida, and again, very Hispanically influenced. Georgia and the Middle South is kind of a hybrid, and so is the East Coast. The East Coast is a hybrid of technical and physicality depending on the state and depending on the kind of people that they have. And that just comes down to origins and the influence of the areas. And so that's just kind of sort of the correlations and stuff of what I've noticed and helped me in terms of when I'm recruiting people and knowing the players that I talk with over here. It's a huge part of what I think is valuable in coaching. Thank you.